What's up, y'all? This is Ivan Funkboy Bodley, bassist, author, whatever else. You're watching the Case for Bass. Rock.
Somebody asked me how I know. I just smiled and said she told me so. Cause you ain't seen nothing yet. I'm so bad. He's so bad. He's so bad. He's so bad. He's so bad. I ain't gonna do you wrong. That's why you go. I ain't gonna do you wrong. Cause I don't wanna. None of us are free.
We have a very unique individual here. He's definitely one of the working class players out there. His credit summaries are pretty impressive. This cool funketeer has performed with 54 Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, famous inductees, and 13 Broadway shows. He's magna cum laude Berklee College of Music graduate with diverse music industry experience. New York Blues Hall of Famer, inductee, creative and versatile bassist, performer, producer, musical director, composer, arranger, vocalist, instructor. What do you not do?
And author. He is an author.
That's right. And he is, of course, let me finish first. So, of course, outside of being an inductee and, of course, playing on Broadway shows, he also plays a variety of styles. You're a creative, versatile bassist, performer, producer, as we went through. But you also play acoustic, electric, fretted, fretless, 4-string and 5-string basses. Solid professional experience, diverse musical background. He, of course, is a big fender of Fenders, Moxie, Gresh, and Warrior basses, Hartke amplifiers, DR strings, and let's not forget that this wonderful funketeer is also an author of his book titled "Am I Famous Yet?" The Memoir of a Working Class Rock Star. Let's welcome Ivan Funkboy Bodley. Welcome, everybody.
Hey, fellas. Great to see you, man.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank you for
exhausted just listening to all that. I'm tired.
Yep. But thank you for saying yes to us. No, we're happy, and you actually have a very impressive roster of material. Let's take it back to when you started playing the bass. Was that your original instrument?
It actually was. I mean, I dabbled in a couple of things, as a much younger person. I think I played viola for about a week. I played guitar for about 2 weeks. I played piano for maybe 6 months, like in 7th grade, and then nothing. And then when I was a senior in high school, I said, bass. I think bass might be the thing. And I picked up one of these or something akin to this, and yeah.
Now, what was your first bass? Because you mentioned that you're holding an acoustic one, but what was your first bass?
First bass, I got extremely lucky. There was a kid at my high school who I'm still friends with today, a guy named Rick Lazarus. He's out of Nashville, Tennessee. In fact, he's the stage manager for Luke Combs for the country show right now. But he was the bass player. He was a year older than me. So he's a much older gentleman than me. And when he graduated high school, for my senior year, my dad asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I said, bass lessons. My friend Rick will give me bass lessons for $15 a week. And he sold me his 1978, this was only a couple of years later, it was 81, I think. So it was a 3-year-old lovingly used blonde Fender Precision bass, which I bought for $475 or $425, I think, 1981. Still have it, still use it. It's still, one of my main basses today, although I've got some more current models that I use on the road. But yeah, it's 78 Fender P bass, my first bass. Unbelievable.
Awesome. When did you fell in love with Fenders? Like, when did you know that was your instrument of choice?
Right. Immediately when I first picked up the Fender P bass, I said, this is, it spoke to me immediately. Like it's a great instrument, and it's a tremendous first instrument to have. I got really lucky with that one. I spent most of the 80s and most of the 90s trying to get away from the Fender sound, trying to get more modern, trying to get 5-string, trying to get, active electronics, trying to get boutique-y, hand-built, this, that, and the other thing, and did great with that and enjoyed that. And I played 5-string for many, 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 many years. Then starting around, the end of the 90s and into the 2000s, I started getting a lot of jobs working for classic soul artists who recorded with labels like Stax and Motown. And all of those records, all of the things that made them famous were all cut on Fender Precision bass.
Flat and thuddy.
Exactly right. And so I went back to Fenders, probably, I mean, I still will use whatever, sometimes things call for whatever the gig calls for, because I've got a whole arsenal of things that I need. If I need a Music Man, if I need a hollow body Gretsch, I have that. But most of the things, the A bass, the one that's in the bag by the front door at the moment, that's a Precision.
Okay.
It stays that way until I need something else. If I need a jazz bass for a gig, maybe the jazz bass will stay in the bag for another 3 months, and then I'll need a P bass for the gig. So the P bass goes back in there. So since I'd say the mid, what do we call them? The mid noughts, I've been pretty much.
Noughts. Yep.
Yeah. I've been pretty much on a P bass almost all the time. And then, on all of my social media posts, just kind of as a running joke, at the end of it, I say, whatever the gig is, your pal Ivan on Fender bass. And what I'm using the word Fender in that context, meaning the old timers in the old time musicians union directory used to call any electric bass the Fender bass, as opposed to the upright or the string bass. So they
It's like an Elvis thing.
You're right. Yeah. They
Yes.
just like any electric bass is called a Fender bass. So so I use it kind of in that joking regard. And also recently, you just mentioned the companies that I've got basses by. I just got a new one from a company in Austria called Byte, B-I-T-E, Byte Guitars. And they do 100% custom specification, made to order instruments. The color, the color of the screws that hold the scratch plate on, the type of bridge, the type of neck, everything, So they made me a really beautiful. It's kind of like a modern P bass thing with a jazz bass style neck on it with the block inlays and the bound fingerboard and all that kind of stuff. So I've been using the Byte guitars for just recently. I just started using those. And that,
How did you discover them? How did you find them?
They found me. They
found
found
you.
me. That I'm, like the same way you guys found me. Like they figured that I'm working enough and that I'm on stages enough and I'm on social media enough that they figured like if they put a bass in my hands, it would be to their advantage. And I was like, hey, send it over. I'll give it a shot. Be happy to do it. So
see, I was friends with you on Facebook, so I knew that I was following you for quite a while now. So I also knew that when we were doing our first, the idea of when we were discovering the idea of doing our first episode, I reached out right away. You had a post on there recently, and I said, something, I'm gonna reach out to Ivan and then just ask him, just see what he has to say. And I reached out to several people, but you were the first one to respond. So I reached out, to Doug Pinnick. I reached out from King's X. He responded. He was number 2.
Nice.
So he said, hey, reach out to my guy and then we'll arrange it. But you responded right away. You were like, hey, man, how about Wednesday?
He's got a guy. I don't have a guy.
Yep. So no, but the fact that you were right there and you were right on, I was like, dude, that's awesome. So Greg and I were like, yay.
I've noticed that though. Like top bass players don't have guys. Like guys that aren't in like solid committed bands who I've met because I've had the luxury of being in like the opening act that we have to go try and blow you guys away, have to we go out. But I always talk to players that are playing in these top ranked bands, and I always go, how do you get all these gigs? And I'm not going to mention names yet, but the guy says to me, he goes, my phone rings. And I go, well, your phone rings. He goes, yeah, that's how I end up playing in this band, in this band, in this band, in this band. And if I have the time to make it, either in between a gig or I'm down or whatever it is, I'm the guy. I book myself. And I find that's the way it is with bass players, because number one, we're reliable. Number two, we commit to the gig, and we all want it. Now, I when in my younger days, I had always been like, I want to be one of these guys. And, if there was anybody who had an open date or I got a call, I'm learning 40 songs in 2-3 days. I'm getting on stage. I wrote my charts. Fortunately I had really good teachers, and it made it possible for me to be part of this community. And you have any stories like that?
Yeah, all of them. That is exactly right. But I've been knocking around New York City for 30-something years now. I've been going to every jam session I could ever go to. I've been meeting everybody I could do. All of my gigs came from something else. Looking backwards, I can see it was a very logical sort of step-by-step evolution. But there was no possible way looking forward I could have planned it. What was going to lead to what? You never know what's going to lead to what. So when I got out of music school, I think I had 4 goals. I was going to play on the David Letterman show. I was going to play on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson or Jay Leno, and I was going to appear at Madison Square Garden, and I was going to play on Saturday Night Live. Those were my 4 dream, bucket list goals, and I've had a 30-year career, and not one of those things has happened. Not one of them. I've done a lot of other cool, really interesting stuff. I've played everywhere else in the world, but all the 4 bucket list things, not one of them. So you can't plan these things really, but you have to show up on time. You have to be prepared. You have to have a good attitude. You have to have a business card. You have to have a custom monogram guitar pick that you give to people. That was a big thing with me. I had a pink guitar pick with a little logo of me on the front and the website on the back. It's like, here, this is my card. And people have remembered that for years and years, and reached out, they just and the more that you get seen, if you're just out and about at the jam session, they remember, oh, yeah. No, I like your playing because I saw you once in 1987 do something, and then they're, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. So when they see you, they'll tend to give you a call. So you just have to kind of be around all the time.
And a lot of that was before the internet and all the modern exposure. It's when people had to pick up a phone.
Right.
Or you had to get something in the mail. And you could talk about this. Sometimes Anthony and I talk about this is whenever you're friends with a bass player, you're always at a gig.
Yeah.
And for all the things and for all the things you mentioned about the shows, I'm pretty sure you've had run-ins with bass players from those shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can still run into them or talk to them, but there's only one bass player at a gig.
We very seldom get to play together. I've done a couple of gigs where there were a 2 bass situation, and those are even more interesting. But yeah, you're right. So there's kind of a very supportive, fraternity, camaraderie. Exactly right. Our buddy Mike Biseglia started a loose organization called the Bass Brunch, the NYC Bass Brunch. This is going back probably 10, 15 years now. And he just put out an APB and who wants to get together at the old rodeo bar, just have lunch. And we started showing up as a group of, anywhere between 5 and 20 of us will show up, once a month, once every other month, and just talk about anything, life, strings, whatever, and we exchange numbers, and sometimes we exchange gigs, and sometimes, we're seldom as bass players in a position to hire people.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Seldom the contractors on the gig, but very often, somebody might need a sub.
Mm-hmm.
Out of town, I got this other thing. Can you possibly come in and pinch hit for me? And as you say, being able to write your own charts and being reliable, that goes a long way.
That goes a long way. Absolutely.
Yeah,
well, those are the overlooked talents of being a fill-in, isn't it?
Yes. Okay, what I was asking was, when you graduated from Berklee, were you a working musician while you were in college, or did you actually start working once you got out of college? How did that work out for you?
I was a working musician before I went to Berklee.
Okay.
I went there late in life. I was what they call a continuing education student. I didn't go to Berklee until I was 26. I already had a college degree from Tulane down in New Orleans.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I started in high school, and in New Orleans, I was a music director of my college radio station. So that was kind of like my foray into the music business world, which I had a whole other second career in. That was my first career. So then that's when I started doing what I call semi-pro and pro gigs in New Orleans. The first sort of biggish thing I did in New Orleans was get hired in a pickup band to back up Bo Diddley a few times when he came through town. He was the first sort of national guy that I played behind.
Can I ask what years those were?
You can, and if I can remember, I'll tell you. I think that was about 84, 85, thereabouts.
Because he had a lot of players go through his career. Two of them I knew. I don't know if you ever bumped into them. One would be the guitar player Carmen Grillo from Tower of Power.
No, wow, okay.
And the other was my friend. He was a Hammond player. Al Weissman was all over Manhattan. He played every pickup gig in the world, but he was with Bo, but he was also with Roomful of Blues for a long time.
Right.
And he played with Matt Guitar Murphy, Ashford Simpson, right. But you end up running into people that, because we're bass players, you're never on the same stage with them. But do you have any good Bo stories about him cooking for you?
No, he never cooked for me, unfortunately. The thing why so many people play with Bo, because in those days, and I don't know how long he did this, I mean, toward the end of his life, he had a set band that was out of New York.
Yeah, he had Debbie.
Exactly. Debbie Hastings and my friend John Paris played for him for many years.
Yes, John Paris.
Yoshi.
What a player.
It's like he had a great group, and Debbie's tremendous,
Mm-hmm.
But prior to that, so when I met him this is like 80s. I was a puppy. I didn't know anything. I was a kid. He was traveling. What he would do is he would travel by himself to a city of choice, and he would use an entire pickup band. So he's played with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. It just happens to, I did like 3 different, I did well enough that the next 2 times he came back to New Orleans, I got rehired for the gig again. So he was a real thrill. My biggest memory of Bo was he played in an open E tuning. Right, so his guitar was tuned to an open E chord. So he had the rehearsal. We had a rehearsal for the first time we played with him. So if the capo was on the 3rd fret, we were in the key of G. If the capo was on the 5th fret, we were in the key of A. If there was no capo, we were in the key of E. End of rehearsal. That was it. Information needed. That was all the information you got. All of his songs, except for I think Roadrunner, are all 1 chord. So he would do a 90-minute show of all these 1-chord jams. And it was fascinating, like wildly entertaining. He was an old school show business master showman, never boring, never dull. And you can imagine playing with 0 chord changes per song, how challenging that must be. But he was really something to behold.
Well, it's a lot of feel. It's a lot of thump. It's a lot of thud. It's having the audience have a good time, isn't it?
Exactly right. He was an entertainer, and again, a master showman. He had the cigar box guitar. He had like these custom-made jumpsuits that he would wear.
Yeah,
the whole thing. It was good. He was great. I loved Bo.
That's fantastic. How did you end up running into Sting and ending up on stage with him?
Well, both of those instances you just quoted were as a result of me being the music director for Sam. I got you, Anthony. I hear you, man. Sam Moore.
Oh, awesome.
Sam and Dan. I was Sam's music director for 13 years on the road.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
The people that I met standing next to Sam were Mr. Sting, who you're referencing, the Ahmet Erdogan after party. We were working with Paul Rogers from Bad Company.
Yes.
Nice.
Standing next to Sam over the years, I've met all the giant rock stars you can imagine. Bono, The Edge, Robert Plant, Springsteen, Paul Rogers, and whatever you've heard about any rock star having any giant ego, when they would come at Sam, there was none of that because he came before them. He was a
real deal.
First tenor. Like his instrument, to this day, he's 88 years old. His instrument is amazing. So nobody ever came at him. They always came almost prostrated before him, like, bowing down to him. And then I would just be standing there, and he would say, "Oh, this is my music director, Ivan." I'd be like, "Oh, hi, Robert Plant. Hi, Mr. Sting. Nice to meet you." It was just a pleasure to be in the room with him always.
Wow. How'd you get hooked up with Sam and Dave? Or is it Sam Moore?
Sam Moore, yeah. Sam, I was in that orbit. Well, again, this was all sort of logical, one foot in front of the other. The first classic soul group I worked with in New York area was the Shirelles. And the Shirelles, the drummer in the Shirelles was a gentleman by the name of Crusher Green. Crusher Green was the drummer for Wilson Pickett, he was in the band starting with when Mustang was on the charts, 65.
Wow.
He went on Wilson's MD like for the rest of his life. Crusher was in a band called the Uptown Horns Review. The Uptown Horns, are the horn section on the Rolling Stones Steel Wheels
Rolling
tour.
Stones Steel Wheels tour. Yep.
B-52's Love Shack. Cameo Word Up.
I saw them with Gary Moore.
Yes. So I had done a blues gig, a $50 blues gig at a place called La Barbat, a now defunct club.
Oh, La Barbat on
La
57th
Barbat.
Street. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
With a that I knew back from my New Orleans days, the New Orleans blues siren. This lady was named Timothea Beckerman, and she was just like a little 4'0" shouter, screamer. She was great. And Crispin Seo from the Uptown Horns happened to be the horn player on that job. So Crispin had met me once and played with me on a $50 gig. Crusher I knew from the Shirelles. It came time to do an Uptown Horns gig. This is 94, going back to 94. They needed a bass player kind of last minute because T.M. Stevens had done their record.
Oh, T.M. Stevens.
The amazing T.M. Stevens.
Yep.
Wasn't available for the live date. Crusher knew that I did my homework. We just talked about this, doing your charts, doing your homework. Knew that I'd done my homework for the Shirelles, recommended me to Crispin. Crispin had seen me on the $50 blues gig at La Barbat, said, yes, let's give him a try. They gave me a normal bias cassette tape, a C60 cassette tape of their album, and said, here, learn these songs. I had a week. I wrote my own charts. We had one rehearsal. We did an album CD release party for them at the Bottom Line, featuring the Uptown Horns Reviews, featuring Susie Tyrell, who's now in the E Street Band, Charlie Giordano, who's now in the E Street Band, Bernard Fowler, who plays with a band called the Rolling Stones, Vernon Reed from Living Colour on guitar, and special guest Peter Wolf from the Jay Giles Band.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
This is my first gig at the Bottom Line, first gig with the Uptown Horns. I just had to come in, know my stuff well enough to get called back, basically.
Okay.
So I did well enough, apparently, because the Uptown Horns kept me in their employ. So again, during the 90s, everybody, all the R&B stars from the 60s and 70s would travel by themselves, and they would use pickup bands in the local markets.
Got
When
it.
they came to New York City, they would use the Uptown Horns Review because it was a great band. It was a killer band. Again, Crusher Green drums, you can do no wrong. So through them, I met Ann Peebles. I met Eddie Floyd. Met and backed up, I should say. We did a lot of gigs with Solomon Burke. We did a lot of gigs. We did gigs with Rufus Thomas and Carla Thomas. Martha Reed. We did gigs with Sam Moore. So that's how I met Sam, was, just being a bass player for the Uptown Horns Review in 96. Played with him a few more times when he would come to the New York market. Something happened. Somebody got, sick. Somebody broke a nail. He needed a bass player, music director in 2003. Quick, call Ivan. That was the thing. So you sort of develop this reputation. And then, I was the music director from 2003 for 13 years till he retired. We did his 80th birthday concert in Tokyo 8 years ago, and
Wow.
all the stuff I just mentioned before all happened because I'm standing next to Sam playing Soul
That's
Man.
amazing.
Every night.
Okay.
It was just a thrill.
That's
Awesome.
amazing.
Let me talk about, this is a non-bass question, it's non sequitur, non-bass. See, how tall are you? I know that I see your photos. You look huge.
6'5" without the pumps in the hair.
Okay. So
Pumps.
you
Wait.
look like you're forward from like the New York Knicks.
Well, taller than most of
Awesome,
the
dude.
That's all right. Actually, and because of that, years and years ago, when I used to work at Epic Records years ago, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts were one of our clients. They were on Blackheart Records. You guys see it. So there was a time where Joan Jett needed a bass player, and I'm thinking like,
Sure.
wait a minute, I'm a bass player, So I talked to the publicist, who talked to the manager, and they said no, they wouldn't even audition me because I'm 6'5", she's 5'2".
Oh.
So standing next to Joan on stage, she would have looked like an absolute, a little person. They were like, no, we can't have.
Well, it's so funny they mention that because her players are all short.
Yeah.
They're all, they're not
Now that's definitely a non sequitur. Leading into it is not getting hired because of your height.
because you're height.
Yeah. The height discrimination. I've been the victim.
Well,
of
also
height.
funny, I knew that, speaking of height and like weight, a friend of mine, when I was in the military, a buddy of mine auditioned for HR's band, the Bad Brains, not HR, but not the Bad Brains, but HR's Human Rights Band. And I was so jealous of him. And I said, man, I said, you have the dreads, but you're not getting in because you're too big. And he said, no, bullshit, man. They're Rastafarians. They're all about being organic and natural.
Yeah.
He
They're
went
all
to do the
5'3".
audition. Yeah. He went to do the audition, and HR looks at Dr. No. He says, him play well, but him too big.
Him too big.
That was it. Him too big. Yeah. So,
Wow.
so have you ever been in a position where your height has been a detriment, or just that one time?
That's the only time, you know, and I'm not, and PS, you know, I was so young then, it was before I'd even gone to music school. I was in no way or shape or form should have been in the Black Arts at that point in my life. But I just thought it was interesting. They wouldn't even because of the height. But it's fine. It's fine.
If I could ask, what was the click that said I have to go to music school, let alone Berkeley at a continuing education age?
Right. Well, that's the thing. So I went to Tulane University, and I say that I went to really, you know, the University of WTUL radio. That's what I was doing, was the music director business. And I studied at the feet of the Neville brothers, literally at their feet, and the meters.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And Aaron Neville's a dear friend of mine to this day, and George Porter, I stole all of his licks. You know, I'm like literally looking up at them at the stage at the Patinas, just taking notes, absorbing all that stuff like a sponge. Went in, because of my music business contacts from the radio station, I went into the publicity department at Epic Records, and I was a publicist for Epic from 86 to 89.
Oh, wow.
I was cool.
Big years.
Yeah, it was big, and I all the gold records I have in the wall in the other room are all stuff that I have from the business side, all the publicity side, not stuff that I ever played on. And it was cool. It was interesting. But what I got and I was half of that time was in the New York office, and half of that time was in the LA office. By the end of it, I had my own corporate Amex card and my own office and this, that, and the other thing. But what I came to realize what the music business was about marketing. It was about business. It was not about music. So even though I was getting to hang out with these very creative
people, it's all about marketing.
All about marketing. They could be, and I had one of the VPs of product management said, I don't know anything about music. I could be selling soap. He said this to me with a straight face. And this guy made millions of dollars for many, many, successful musicians. But I got to work with some great people. I worked on Living Colour's first album, Vivid. That's how I got to know Stanley Clarke. I was his publicist for those years. I worked with the Black Arts. I worked with, I was around a little bit during the Michael Jackson bad years. I was around a little bit for Luther Vandross, that kind of stuff. It was a very interesting time, but it had nothing to do with music and the creativity that I was looking for. So I ended up taking some night classes while I was a publicist at Epic at the Bass Institute in Hollywood.
Wow.
So I got
a lot of people went through that place.
Nice.
Yeah, a lot of people went through that place.
Yeah, like a 3-month program. I got my toe wet. I'm thinking I think I kind of like this. I may want to do this. And then suddenly, through a series of other unrelated events, I got a chance because I had a girlfriend who lived in England. She said, let's come stay over here. So I said, fine, cool. So I quit my job, turned in my corporate Amex card, sold my stuff, went to England, and I did nothing but play bass for about a year and a half.
Wow.
Are they digging the American or what?
I'm just a working class guy, working in pubs, doing cover bands, doing weddings, that kind of thing, But that's when I sort of started to realize, all right, if I'm going to really try to do this as a career thing, I need to get educated because my education was spotty at best. It was incomplete. I hadn't, there was no music program at my high school. I hadn't studied music in college. I'd just been working semi-professionally. They had these night classes from the Bass Institute. I said, I really need to get this thing together to even have a shot at it. And also knowing full well that trying to make a living, much less be quote unquote successful in the music business as a performer is almost impossible. Like the odds are so against you.
The odds are very against you, exactly.
So I came to this realization there was nothing else I really wanted to do. Like nothing. There's nothing else that's going to sort of, give me a shot at being happy. So I said, all right, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to take a shot at this thing, I need to get myself educated, I need to get my skill sets together, and then, work hard and either have the luck or don't have the luck. And, but I had to sort of give myself enough of a running start to be able to give myself the opportunities to succeed.
Okay.
Because otherwise, you get opportunities and you don't have the goods to back it up. You don't have the skill set, so you don't have the education, whatever it is. You're not gonna succeed. You're not gonna be called back. Basically, that's the thing.
Sure.
Do you find now that you have you had the background and you're developing, ideas of what composition and writing are about, that when you go back to the 4-string bass, that you end up, what am I thinking about? Thinking about how you hear other players and that you can play through other parts that are being expressed when you play?
Yeah, I mean, just because bass is kind of the only thing that I do half it all decently. Like, I can play a couple bar chords on the guitar. I can pick up 3-note chords on the piano. I understand the theory behind it and some of the mechanics, but I can't really execute it. Like I played guitar on TV one time and one time only, So that
was one time you played and you didn't get a call back.
Yeah, well, I actually am. So it's a weird story too, because we were doing the Mike Huckabee show on Fox.
Oh wow!
And Governor Huckabee is a bass player.
Yes, he is a bass player.
Yes, he's a bass player.
So they wouldn't let you play bass.
They wouldn't let me play bass.
Not if Governor Huckabee's playing bass, you're not playing bass.
Yeah, and
anybody with the title of governor gets to play bass before I do, and it's fine.
Sure.
So I had to play 6-string guitar because I needed to conduct the show. We were only doing, Hold On, I'm Coming kind of thing. So I could work out how to play Hold On, I'm Coming on 6-string. So yeah, so play guitar. And I have people who know me only as Sam Moore's guitarist because they only ever saw me on Fox News.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
But that's actually not a bad thing to have on your resume, just the fact that he's playing guitar player. That's actually pretty awesome.
But you'll take the bass spot.
Well,
Exactly.
but the bass is really what I do. So when I sit down and I'm making my charts, as we've been talking about doing, I'm transcribing with a bass in my hand. I don't sit at the piano. So sometimes the upper structures of the chords, I'm getting better, but sometimes I'm a little hit or miss because I'm trying to work out chord voicings on the bass. So
Okay.
I approach everything from the bottom up just because of my world experience,
Got it. Now, I noticed in the background, so I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Uh-oh, he's going to go into this.
Yep, you have an acoustic bass to the far right. Yep, so I played acoustic bass as well in high school. How often do you get jobs playing your acoustic bass, and which one do you prefer? Do you prefer to be on the electric, or do you like being an acoustic as well?
I as you were reading from my self-proclaimed bio that I play electric, acoustic, fretted, fretless, 4-string, 5-string, that was sort of like in an effort to initially sort of portray myself as like, I can cover any of your low-end needs. I got whatever you need, I can cover it. I can. But however, I've come to realize sort of in my travels and in my experience, what I am is I'm an electric bass guitar player with an acoustic double.
Oh, okay.
People that's their primary instrument, is the acoustic. And the whole one of the quarantine projects I gave myself during lockdown was trying to finally get my bowing together. Like I sit down and I played with the bow for at least an hour, 2 hours an hour a day, like for like a year and a half.
Really? Oh wow.
Trying to get any sound out of this damn thing at all. Because it's like trying to play bass guitar with a fly swatter, like the way the way that you generate the pitch is completely foreign to everything that we've been used to for plucking, whatever. So I'm trying to give myself, because in Broadway shows, very often there's 2 songs on electric and one of them has an arco, a bowed part.
Okay.
So I have to be able to do some of that. I'm not good at it. But I can pass. You know what I'm saying? Like I can get by with it.
So you can almost do it. So you're almost doing a fake it until you make it kind of thing.
Kinda, yeah. And I've played. There's one book that I subbed on, was a show called Amazing Grace, and it was an all acoustic orchestra. It was only acoustic bass. It was only arco. It was only bowed. And I did it. I sat down and I learned that show, and I was able to do it. Passively enough, they let me come back 4 times. The show was only open for about 4 months, so it ended up closing before I got to do much experience with it. But so I feel like I can do it, but it's really, I know that it's my secondary or tertiary sort of skill set. So what I am is an electric bass player with an acoustic double. I embrace that. I'm happy with it. I'm cool with it.
Here's a question. Playing on Broadway, you listed that you played in the Spider-Man show.
Yeah.
Now, was that as a bass player? Were you in the band?
I subbed in the band in the pit. Spider-Man was very, very interesting. I probably played.
You weren't there when the guy fell, right?
No. Chris Tierney was his name. And Chris is a lovely human being. In fact, all my Broadway experience has been as a sub, not as a chair holder. And Spider-Man, I probably played 45 performances there, roughly. When I went to go watch the book, when you first get hired on to sort of like sub in, you go and you sit behind the player that you're going to be subbing for and you watch the book. So one of the first people I met there was the gentleman that they dropped, the guy named Chris Tierney. And when I came back in to do my first performance, I came in the door. He said, "Hey, welcome back." And I hadn't remembered that I'd met him. And he had totally remembered me. He's a professional aerialist. That's his job.
Really?
As he was falling down, I think 3 stories he fell, he realized he was falling on his back. And he realized that was going to be very bad for him. So he twisted his body in the air so he landed on his feet.
Like a cat.
Like a cat.
Yeah, he became a feline for the moment. That was just
correct. He was in the hospital. He had 10 broken bones, but he realized at that time that he was not paralyzed. So his goal was, he said, "I'm going straight back to work as soon as I'm out of this hospital bed." And he did. And he flew every day for the entire run of the show. I mean, that's his job. Like, he flies through the air. That's what he does for a living. So even though he had a terrible, terrible accident, he came back from it and went right back to work.
The question I have is, was Matt Beck the music director at the time?
Matt was never the music director. I can't remember if Matt, did he ever conduct it while I was there?
He was Rod Stewart's. I know he was Rod Stewart's music director for a while. That was at least part of his resume. And
very thing, though, yeah.
That was he's one of the most interesting musicians I've ever met, because he plays guitar, everything backwards and upside down. And I had met him through a bandmate, and he came out at a private party and played, and I had never met him, and I had never experienced what he does. And it was just one of the most unique expressions of music from a guitar player that I had ever heard, because of the voicings that came out of his instrument. And it was just he was such a nice person to talk to, very laid back, extremely knowledgeable, and let alone, he's doing this thing with Rob Thomas and Matchbox 20 but just it seemed that the level of his output was so much greater than the gig he was playing. I'm not going to disparage whatever gig people do, but then supposedly I had heard that he was very involved in the Spider-Man production.
He was
and that when I saw your name,
he was guitar. There were 3 guitar chairs. I think he was guitar 2 when I was there. He's also a monster keyboard player too.
Yes.
He's a tremendous musician and encyclopedia of knowledge.
How many basses do you have?
I don't know. I think probably about 20, but I'm not sure. And again, I used 3 of them, 2 of them really. So most of them are wall candy.
It's always scary when someone says, "I don't know."
I'm not sure. Well, there were two more that came into the fold this year. So whatever my count was, it just got thrown off. So I think it was in the 20 range, or right at 20, I think.
Okay.
Do they get set up? Do they get played? Do they just collect dust? What do they do?
3 of them do.
3 of them do. And the other
3 of them.
cases?
No, they're on the walls, looking pretty.
Nice.
Mm.
Nice.
Wow.
I can't put up with all my girlfriend gets me out.
I was in city. Do you have a lady friend that's okay with what you do, or?
She's a better musician than all of us combined. She's a conductor on Broadway, so she's very in tune with what I do, and has her own career. She's much busier than I am, so yeah, she can tolerate a few basses, not a problem.
Okay. So if she's a conductor, then what does she play?
She's a keyboardist conductor. She's got a master's degree in operatic accompaniment. She's, like I said, she's way better than all of us combined. She's really good.
Yeah.
I just finished a tour with Humble Pie in September. We did a sort of a 2-week run up the East Coast and into the Midwest. So we're looking forward to what that's going to bring for the next calendar year. We're hoping late spring, early summer. We don't know exactly. It's up to at that point it becomes up to agents and managers and people above our pay grade. So that's on the back burner, but looking very promising. The rest of it, in the meantime, is weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs. I've just finished a bunch of classic soul, classic rock and roll concerts. I've worked with Jay and the Americans quite a bit. Last week we did the Coasters, the Skyliners, the Elegants. One of these sort of doo-wop extravaganza shows.
Okay.
So it's booked. It's been busy. There's a tribute to the Legendary Ladies of Soul show that I'm doing down in Virginia in a couple of weeks. So.
Awesome.
As always, it's one of these and two of those and three of those, and somewhere in the end of it, you have enough to pay the rent. A fair amount. I mean, neither of my parents are musical, so to speak, but my mother had a pretty decent, respectable record collection. So, I grew up listening to, she had Stevie Wonder's Signed, Sealed, Delivered. She had Ike and Tina live at Carnegie Hall. Gladys Knight, Midnight Train, these are the sort of the records my mom had. So my mom's record collection was pretty hip. So I grew up listening to that, grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, so I was, surrounded by the deep Southern soul music that's around, as well as the regular commercial rock radio of the time, which is in all the 70s and 80s, stuff that you would expect that was popular in the classic rock genre. So I have all that in my DNA. And because I grew up in Tennessee, I have all the country music stuff in my DNA too, without realizing it or aspiring to it. You just grow up around it, hearing it all the time. So I understand that stuff. I have a great deal of interest in 70s funk music, which is kind of what I started playing,
Okay.
So it just depends, whoever will hire me for whatever, I play that kind of music, whatever that is. See this?
Oh, I know what that is. He makes the foam mute.
Packing foam. Goes under the strings by the bridge.
Interesting.
Oh, well,
So DR, I've been with DR back since Rosa was their PR person. It's been a bunch of years. Usually I use the high def neon color brights, the fluorescent ones.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
It depends on the bass. I've seen pictures of Anthony. I've seen you with, you got some green strings on one of your basses, I think I've seen, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
So I've got a purple metal flake finish, Adam Clayton from U2 signature model Fender P bass.
Oh, wow.
That I have the fluorescent pink strings on. Nice. Just looks good. I've got a white P bass that I put a black and orange flame pickguard on. That has the orange fluorescent strings on it. For the Humble Pie thing, I had to go traditional. So I have a mod shop, a custom built Fender P bass that's built to the exact specifications of what Greg Ridley, the original bass player at Humble Pie, he bought his bass new today. So it's a blonde P bass with a tortoise pickguard, the 60s pickups in it. But for the Greg sound, I needed flat wound strings, foam under the bridge, that kind of thing. So that. So it depends on the gig, what it is. But I'll either use rounds, very dead rounds, or flats. I'm using the foam mutes almost all the time now because, as I was talking before, a lot of the gigs I was getting were with Motown and Stax types of gigs, and those gigs are all muted. They're muted. Jameson had the foam mutes under the bridge. Duck didn't play with the mutes so much, but he definitely played with the flats and the old sort of muted kind of style.
He also had that one.
Right, well, Jameson, they used famously the
Jameson
hook.
too.
Called it the hook. But Jameson had somehow the speed he could get with the hook was amazing. I don't know how he was able to do that. So the amount of notes he was able to play with one finger.
He might have been coming back like Geddy Lee does with using his finger like a guitar pick or something.
If he was a runner and he had one leg, he'd be literally running on one leg really fast.
Yeah. No, I've seen videos of him doing it, and it's all upstrokes. There's no double picking. It's all upstrokes.
Wow.
And you can just do it, all the 16
That's
notes.
incredible.
Yeah.
What would you tell any aspiring bass player who wants to be a working session player? Like, what would be your words of advice, or the secret sauce, if that exists?
Secret sauce. I don't know. So much of it, again, like I was saying, it seems very logical in retrospect. It's one foot in front of the other. So you have to give yourself the tools, the skill sets to be able to succeed. So in my case, for instance, we were talking about chart reading a minute ago. When I first went to Berkeley, I couldn't read a note. I understood what the symbols meant, and I know good boys do fine always, but that's it. I couldn't recognize anything on sight at all. So, but I'd also studied with a guy in London who taught me the entire Berkeley harmony system in private lessons within 6 months. So I took a placement exam when I got there. They put me in Reading 101, and then I placed out of 2 years of harmony. Right, so the first harmony class I took was reading. I didn't know. I was just going in there, but what I knew was I needed to give myself the tools to be able to succeed. And reading is one of potential tools. It's not required. We all know great musicians, famous musicians who don't read a note.
No.
But what reading did for me was it gives me an opportunity to get into more different situations, more situations where it's last minute. It's last minute, we got charts, or the Broadway thing, you have to be able to read to some extent, even though you really have to prepare to the point where you've almost memorized the book before you go in, but you really have to be on book. So the more that I've done that over the years, the easier that's gotten for me. I'm at this point, interestingly enough, I'm medium to okay sight reader as a bass player. As a trumpet player, I'm a lousy sight reader. You know what I'm saying? Because they all grew up playing in band. They grew up reading from day one. All the horn players, all the string players, right? They've all read their whole lives. Rhythm section players like us didn't need to. We were learning cover tunes off the radio. That's how we learned how to play. So I came to that very late, and in a very remedial sense, like give the 26-year-old dumb guy reading 101 and hope for the best,
Wow.
But again, like having more genres that I can exist in, more situations. If I can, I'm pretty good with chord charts. So if I had a chord chart, I could almost survive almost anything that's going on. Working in jam sessions, going to jam sessions, being seen, being heard. I was in the house band at a blues jam in New York, late 90s, early 2000s, run by a guy named Bobby Nathan, who used to own Unique Studios. And, he hired me in the studio in the house band just because I kept showing up every Monday and they needed a bass player. So doing that, suddenly like the ears have to get really big because you're playing songs constantly that you don't know, and you're trying to, learn how to read the guitar player's finger to find out what the root note is, the piano player's left hand, like be able to jump in any direction. So like the ear training was, even though it wasn't formalized, it was so crucial to being able to develop what I do. So again, like giving myself the tools that I needed to be able to succeed in as many arenas as possible, and also taking any gig. So it's a blues gig, it's a wedding, it's a Broadway pit gig, it's you don't start out on Broadway usually, you start out at, doing a regional theater thing, or pickup gigs, anything you can do. And again, you don't know what leads to what. So you just also have to be there, with a good attitude, have your equipment right, have your wardrobe appropriate for whatever the gig is, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Have the tools to succeed, because, you'll get opportunities by being around people. And then if you do a good job, then you can get called back, and you don't know what's going to lead to what. So the perseverance, and just, you gotta love the sport. You have to love the sport, There's no other way to do it. Knock on wood, I've not needed to have a day job since 1995.
Wow.
It's a combination of hard work and luck and perseverance and all that. But as the saying goes, I ain't too proud to beg. So, should the need arise, especially during the pandemic, I was like, do I need to do something else? Because I will. I'll be happy to do it. I will flip burgers. I'll do what I got to do to pay the rent and
Sure.
you know, keep the lights on. So far, I haven't needed to, and I know how lucky that is. I mean, I know I've worked very hard, but I also understand that there's luck involved and goodwill from other people. You know what I mean? It's not just me. It's other people have shepherded me through this as well as myself. You know.
This
Wow.
is great.
All right.
This is such a great story. This is Ivan.
great.
It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Man, my pleasure.
We promise
My
you
pleasure.
no more questions. This is our final ending. So, first and foremost, Ivan Bodley,
Author.
Funkboy Bodley, thank you very much for being with us. Author, musician,
Books
plumber,
available on Amazon.
a football player for the Dallas Cowboys.
Well, you know, hey, what does the gig pay? We'll talk. We can talk.
We'll talk. Exactly. Thank you very much, bud. This is awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed talking to you guys.